Now, today is an opportunity for us to commemorate the individuals and events that shaped the history of our nations and celebrate the 200 years of peace that followed. On June 18, 1812, President Madison signed the war bill that was passed by Congress, officially beginning the War of 1812. This action threw Niagara into the front lines of a war that would see destructions of farms, the burning of towns, and thousands of deaths. And it didn't take long for the effects of the war to reach Niagara. Queenston, where we stand today, became the first major battle of the war in Niagara. The Battle of Queenston Heights symbolized the struggle for Canada as British, Canadian, and Native allies came together to defend Canada. With this weekend's commemorations, we are not celebrating a war that destroyed our communities, but rather we are celebrating the enduring peace that has emerged and the lasting friendship between our nations. British officer John Latour summed up the war correctly when he lamented that the war was a hot, unnatural war between kindred people. So here we are today, commemoration, celebration, and legacy, recognizing 200 years of peace among our nations. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we have some very special guests today, and it is my honor and privilege to introduce His Excellency, the Governor-General of Canada, David Johnston. Sir.
Ministers, parliamentarians, dignitaries, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for this warm welcome on this warm and sunny, beautiful day. Such a pleasure to be here to commemorate an important chapter in the history of Canada. The Battle of Queenston Heights has been described as both a victory and a tragedy for the British, Canadian, and First Nation peoples who fought together against the Americans. And in fact, this can be said of the War of 1812 in its entirety. Une tragédie parce que, souvenons-nous, la guerre signifie que nous ne sommes pas arrivés à nos fins de continuing their rebellion against Britain in Canada and native peoples divided in their allegiances. At the heart of this North American Civil War, as Taylor calls it, there was a great paradox that provides us with an important and timeless lesson. The paradox is that it was in many ways our similarities rather than our differences that led to war. Taylor writes, "The Republic and the Empire competed for the allegiance of peoples in North America, native, settler, and immigrant. Americans and Britons spoke the same language and conducted more trade with one another than with other nations. But their overlapping migrations and commerce generated the friction of competition." End of quote. As we know, the failure to resolve this competition peacefully led to a costly and damaging war. And once war had broken out, it was won through the cooperation of those who came together to fight for Canada. To this day, the War of 1812 is instructive in its complexity. As Governor-General and Commander-in-Chief of Canada, I encourage all Canadians to learn more about this episode in our history and its important consequences. I also want to thank those of you who've come together in this bicentennial year to commemorate the Battle of Queenston Heights and the War of 1812. An accurate and understanding of our history is essential to building a smarter, more caring Canada. Merci. Manière pacifique. The Niagara region and other parts of Canada were turned into battlefields, and the suffering of soldiers and ordinary people was starkly real. However, the Battle of Queenston Heights and the War of 1812 also represent important victories for Canada and ultimately for our relationship with the United States. Today, we are fortunate to share the world's longest undefended border, where our disputes are settled through diplomacy rather than war. But 2 centuries ago, our situation was quite different. À cette époque, ni les Britanniques qui contrôlaient le Canada, ni les Américains qui vivaient au sud ne pensaient pouvoir coexister en Amérique du Nord. Fortunately, they were both wrong, and the War of 1812 was a difficult but important step in learning to live together on this continent. In this country, the war gave Canadians a sense of shared experiences and relationships, opening up possibilities for confederation half a century later. La guerre a aussi démontré que l'on arrive à faire plus en travaillant ensemble. The Battle of Queenston Heights provides a vivid illustration of the power of collaboration. In the pre-dawn of October 13, 1812, an American force crossed the Niagara River to attack the British at the village of Queenston. Despite the Americans' initial success and the subsequent loss of Major General Isaac Brock, the defenders soon united to repel the invaders. Who comprised the forces that won the Battle of Queenston Heights? Well, they were a cross-section of early Canadians, including British soldiers and First Nation warriors, local volunteer militias, and freed slaves. In other battles, French-speaking militias joined the fight to fend off the American forces. In their diversity, the Canadians who united for the War of 1812 foreshadowed our multicultural society of today. It's difficult to overstate the significance of unity and of its opposite throughout the war. As Pulitzer Prize-winning historian Alan Taylor has written, there were in fact 4 overlapping dimensions to the War of 1812. They were Loyalists versus Americans for control of Upper Canada, Federalists versus Republicans within the United States, Irish Republicans